Idea. Anyway, so let's go. I'm going to talk to you about the things that we've been told about the media and how new media is going to change traditional media. So if we think about traditional media, essentially we have print, we have radio, and we have TV. And there are certain things that have brought all of these together that made them common parts of our lives, and there's certain things that just essentially tie them all together. You generally have centralized production. You have centralized distribution. Generally, it's a one-to-many model, so it's one person shouting at the masses. And hopefully, it makes lots and lots of revenue. And of course, all of that has changed over the last few years, and it's one person who's changed that. It was Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who about 20 years ago invented what we now know as the web. So back in CERN, he invented HTTP. But what else happened 20 years ago? We had the first Gulf War, we had the end of the Soviet Union, and most importantly, the first release of Sonic the Hedgehog. So what I'm essentially saying here is that new media isn't new anymore. New media is only new if you're old. We talk about digital natives. We talk about digital immigrants. I think of myself as a digital asylum seeker desperately trying to get onto the Channel Tunnel coming out of Calais. And I think this really affects us all. So if we look at Clay Shirky, back in 1994, he said this. I'm not going to try and say it because I've had a couple of pints of Guinness. You can read it better than I can. But essentially what he was saying is that the cost of production has dropped to zero. But there was one thing that he didn't say, I think, which has sort of driven the development of social media. And this was the Forrester ladder. At the top, you have creators, so they're massively engaged, but very small numbers of them. At the bottom, you have spectators, large numbers, but very, very few are very engaged. And that's because the cost of actually being bothered to do something is still quite high in time and energy. So if we look at 2005, you had the London bombings just after we won the Olympics. And what we have here is that the media were trapped above ground. So you have a guy with a mobile phone, and that picture becomes the defining image. But it's crap quality because mobile cameras weren't very good at the time, and he had to email it to the BBC. But if we look at then the release of the iPhone, you have 80% of people who are carrying around mobile web devices and will and can access the web at any point in time, as opposed to traditional smartphones where only about 55% of them would actually access the web anytime. So you've all seen this picture of the plane that crashed in the Hudson River. And essentially what we have here is a guy with an iPhone, and in 3 clicks, this has become the defining image of this incident. He didn't have to email it to anyone. He uploaded it to Twitter, and that's what then ended up on the front page. Because the ladder's fallen over. The cost of production, the cost of distribution was zero, but you still actually had to be bothered to upload a blog or create a photo or, buy a video camera. So what does this mean? Well, it could mean that you've got some sort of twat in London who decides he likes a new form of sweets and puts a thing up on Twitter and says, anyone want to send me some free sweets and I might blog about it. And generally you'd think, who cares, get a life, go home, have a rest. But luckily, there's a PR guy who's based up in the north of England, and he says, drop me a note with your details and we'll see what we can do. So a couple of weeks later, after sending this tweet, I get a box of Rowntree's Randoms. They're really tasty. I did make myself sick. They only sent me 3 packets, which I thought was a little bit stingy, but never mind. We'll move on. But does this mean that users are going to be controlling media? Well, let's look at a user who has a very powerful influence on the media. This is someone who joined Twitter recently. She's got lots of friends. She's got will.i.am. She's got the Queen of Jordan. She's got Jenny McCarthy, because, of course, it's Oprah Winfrey. So does this mean that the traditional media is going to come over and take social media over? Well, if it does, then this is what we've got to look forward to. This is a picture of Demi Moore's arse as taken by her husband, Ashton Kutcher, and tweeted. Now, what I'd say is there anyone who hasn't seen Demi Moore's arse? Indecent Proposal, you can probably stream it when you get home tonight. Now, luckily, that's not actually the case. So if you look at the most popular videos ever viewed on the web, only 15% of them were actually user-generated content. They may have been viewed in a user format. They may have been viewed in a social way on YouTube or tweeted, but they're actually professionally produced. And the same is true of the written word. So if the most popular sources linked to from Twitter, 80% of them are actually professional media sources, whether that be Mashable, whether that be Guardian, whether that be CNET, whether that be CNN, or whether that be TechCrunch. We'd still desire professionally produced content in some way, shape, or form. And if we go back to our digital natives, we've been told that they don't watch TV, they don't read newspapers, they don't listen to the radio. In fact, viewing figures in Ireland for the youngest audience of about 18 to 24 has gone up 11% over the last 5 years. But that's because they're watching it differently, they're watching it socially. So in the UK, when the X Factor's first episode was on, there was a yogurt brand, Yo Valley, who had a 2-minute ad with some rapping actors, which caused a huge spike in searches, huge spike in tweets, and a huge spike in views, because we're watching it with 2 screens. And it's not just cool things like the X Factor. I say cool, ironically, of course. You might have 3 middle-aged white guys talking about a recession in England back in May, when the British political system finally joined the 20th century, and 5% of all traffic on Twitter at that point was about those 3 guys. So next time someone says that user-generated content is going to take over the world, well, Charlie may have bit his finger, but frankly, that person can bite my ass. Thank you very much.